Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Ignite diehards in the house. Nice. Thank you guys for being with us. Final block of the day. You chose to walk all the way over to the Lakeside Center. How's it been? Been a good week? Good. Glad to hear the energy. We're going to try to keep the energy up. I'll have Gus introduce himself.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Angus, and we'll be your senseis today. Oh. Senseis with PowerPoint skills. So today what we're going to be doing is taking you through the Getting Things Done framework. But where's these things? Okay. So let's do this. About 6 weeks ago, Steve and I said, let's put a session together for Ignite. We follow this framework called GTD, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. And so for the last 6 weeks, we've been doing calls, and we've been going through, how we're going to do the show, what should we do, what's the sort of stuff we're going to do, and we'll go through that. But I've learned a ton of stuff in the last, over that time. I'm super impressed by the way these guys work. So these guys are the real ninjas. I'm the basic one. We're going to run this as the data you see is going to be all show, but what we're going to show you is actually the way we work. So this is the real thing. It's quite cool. Do you want to maybe, Steve Summers, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Summers. I am a productivity ninja. On the side, I'm also an Office 365 customer success manager based in New York. And I'm really looking forward to working with all you today. Steve?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Wynn. I'm also an Office 365 customer success. We all help customers like yourselves help understand usage and adoption of Office 365, which we really enjoy. So we use these tools every day. We feel like they help us be very productive, so we want to share some of those things. Little known fact, I am actually a black belt in real life as well.
That is a little known fact.
Yeah. I'm lethal in a few states, so you might not know what to look at me. And so also we should mention, can you mention real quick your work style and the kind of what you're going to represent?
Sure,
today?
absolutely. I'm a bit of a desk jockey. I love all of the rich clients and use them to their utmost whenever I can. And that means that typically I go in and work in the office maybe once or twice every couple weeks. I'll work from home, but for the most part, I'm sitting at my desk in the office.
And so I'm based in Minneapolis, and I go into the Microsoft office maybe once or twice a week to get some people interaction, but I generally work from home, and I'm also on the road traveling and meeting with customers. And Gus, you're literally working on an island, right?
It's a big island, but it is an island in Australia, so I'm in Melbourne. So again, I have the same job with these three guys, which is why this session I think is really going to be fascinating, because we all actually do the exact same job, but we all approach it in very different ways. So my work style, I'm very much mobile. I probably use my mobile device, like as in my phone, over half the time. So I do almost everything I can on my phone. When I do have my laptop in front of me, I'm a web guy, so I don't use the clients at all. Everything I do is web-based, so OWA. I use all the Office clients, the web versions of them, because I was trying, so I can work from anywhere, basically on any device. So that's sort of how I work.
I also want to ask, before we start also, how many went to the Richard Harbridge and Kanwal session yesterday as kind of when to use Office 365? Okay, about half or so. So one of the themes that I think came out of that, the hard question that they posed was, which tool to use when. And they posed it, the way they positioned it was, it's really not that easy of a question to answer. And as we were having these discussions over the past couple of months on when to use a certain tool, we discovered those very same things. So if you're coming here to learn exactly when to use email, exactly when to use Yammer, you might kind of change your expectation a little bit.
You'll get some ideas, I think.
Yeah.
With three people do it very differently.
Yeah, but I think ultimately what you'll see is that we're all doing kind of different routines, but accomplishing the same goal. And it's really about helping you guys see different ways of working and figuring out, based off of 3 different work styles and you understanding your own work style, which one you might take back and try for yourself.
That's right, and I think we learned from each other as we did this process just how much stuff we didn't know.
Yeah.
And so if we can share some of those tips and get you excited about a new way of working, then we've accomplished our goal today.
Also, we also realize that the world isn't comprised of only Office 365. So you will see other tools that we feel are beneficial to our workflow that aren't necessarily Microsoft tools, but we feel like they are beneficial, and we want to share some of those with you as well.
And we have tons of swag. We're going to have a little competition later on to win swag, so get your tweets up and get ready to start tweeting. Who here, quick show of hands, who's heard of Getting Things Done? Amazing.
Good, nice.
Oh, well, we're done. That's cool. So for those of you who don't know what Getting Things Done is, it's a book by David Allen. I was first introduced to it when I actually joined Yammer in January 2012. My manager at the time, on my first day, sat me down, and I said, what do I need to know? And he just gave me the book and said, read this. This is how we work. And so I've been sort of doing, anyone who's a bit of a practitioner or been playing with it, you know there's 1,000 different ways you can do it. At its basic core, it's about taking the stuff that's out of your mind and putting it into a system that you can work through and be much more productive. So he has a saying, the mind is, what's the saying? The mind
is for having ideas,
That's right.
not for holding them.
For holding them. So if you think about, when you've got tons of stuff on your brain, you've got lots of tasks sort of all up in the air, you're busy, like your head's, like it's full and it's hard to get stuff done. So this system is really to try and get that stuff out of your head into a nice system, and we'll show you the different ways we do that today. And then taking action on that and sort of running through those things.
The other thing we're going to talk about is, we've already mentioned a couple of tools, but what we really understand, especially with working with the customers that we do, is that changing your habits and changing your routines are very much personal things, and they can be very tool agnostic. So we're going to talk about some things that you can consider as you start to kind of think about your habits. And have you ever heard a person that a lot of us probably run around saying, I'm so busy, I've got so much to do, so many things are piling up on my plate. I keep doing all this great work, and as a result, more things get piled on top of me, right? We all kind of are feeling this deluge of work on us, and we're not able to feel like we're really productive. But have you ever heard, or do you know anybody in your life that you feel like is really, really productive? Do you ever hear that person say, gosh, I'm super busy, I can't keep track? That person generally never even mentions the fact that they're busy, right? So they've been able to kind of create processes, create ways in order to get things out of their head and into a process in which they can manage them. So we're going to talk about moving yourself and moving the people that you work with from a culture of busy to thinking about having a culture of being productive. So I've been reading a book recently called The Power of Habit. Has anybody read The Power of Habit? Good, a couple hands have gone up. So you might be familiar with these three elements. So in the book, it talks about a habit has three components. It has a cue, a routine, and a reward. And so the thing I love about the book is that if you're thinking about changing a habit, you have to understand these three elements of that habit. So you have to understand what's the cue, what's the trigger that makes me do a certain thing, what's the routine that I go through in order to enact that, and then what's the reward that I get from doing that routine. And so, like I said, we are going to show you we're going to anchor a lot of the things that we do in kind of common cues that we think that most workers engage in. And then you're going to see 3, sometimes 2 different routines for each of those cues. And then you have to determine for yourself kind of what's that reward. You're going to have to kind of reflect for yourself what's the reward generally for a given habit that I have. But then what we'll encourage you to do is take each of our routines, consider them, and figure out which one do I like the best. Again, based off of my own work style, maybe I like Steve's routine. I'm going to try to enact that when I go back to my workplace. The last thing I want to mention real quick is how many are familiar with the Franklin Covey matrix of important versus urgent? There's that quadrant. Good. Some of you guys are aware of that. And then, so Franklin Covey says, focus on the things that are kind of in quadrant 2, right? The important and not urgent. That's where you should try to focus as much of your time as you can. One of the skills of really productive people are that they apply a third dimension to that, which is significance. So what are those things that are really significant that if I do those today, that are going to create more time for me later? So if you think about prioritization, when you're prioritizing your list of tasks, you move number 4 or number 5 up to number 1, you haven't really created any more time, right? You just reshuffled the deck. So what really productive people do is they look at those things, they figure out which ones are the multipliers. The multipliers meaning if I allow myself to spend a little bit of time on that task today, then it's going to give me a lot more time later on. And a really simple example of that would be if I told you that you could spend 2 hours today setting up your online bill pay, that you'd save a bunch of time later, would you do that? And some people might say, oh, I don't have 2 hours to spend on doing that. I'm not going to do that. But if you did spend 2 hours a day, then you wouldn't have to spend that time writing out checks or getting online and sending payments every time. So spending that 2 hours on online bill pay, saving you a lot of time. So this concept of multipliers, we'll highlight some of those areas where we feel like we apply multipliers to our workflow. So look for those things.
So does that all sound interesting? Because we're about to get serious now. We're going to get into demo. We've got four machines, phones, a lot of potential for stuff to go wrong.
Can we pray to the demo gods real quick? Everybody.
So these are the scenarios that we've picked up to try and show you the different ways we actually do these. Hopefully, most people in this room do at least 1 or 2 of these tasks. I'd be surprised if you didn't do all of them. So let's get into it.
So the first cue is around planning your day. Either planning your day or planning your week. And Gus, as we've been talking and planning over the last couple of weeks, you have a very interesting cue that kind of triggers your routine of planning your week.
Yeah, so again, as part of GTD, one of the tips that they talk about in the book and you see elsewhere is to plan. So planning your week and to try and do that as productive as it sounds on Sunday, so before the week starts. So this year I've made a real conscious effort to try and do that. So my cue, as Steve talked about, is Sunday night. I'm usually at home. We've put Ava, my daughter, to bed. There's usually a pretty crappy TV movie on a Sunday night in Australia on one of our 4 channels. And so I just sit there and I'll pull up. I can either do it on my phone or do it on just the laptop sitting next to the couch. And all I'll do is, again, I use the web client for everything. So I'll come into my week and I'll look through what I have on. Now, when I plan my week, I break up, I use colors. And this is, again, very simple because I just use the web client. But I have 4 things that I want to try and focus my time on, 4 things that are important to me. So when I color code my calendar to make sure that my time is being spent in the right areas. So I've got my team, so I manage a team in APAC, so I make sure I dedicate time that week, or make sure that there's meetings set up to help develop my people, see what they're working on, do that kind of stuff, team meetings. I've got personal stuff, so that's the orange, so things I just need to do in my own time. So I'm customer facing, so I want to make sure I spend a lot of time talking to customers because that's my job. A lot of us who have customer facing roles, and I know even within Microsoft, you can't leave the office because we're too busy. So I make sure I've got customer facing stuff in there. And then the other part of my role is to work with Microsoft partners. So again, making sure, so that's the yellow one, making sure I have time set aside so I'm balanced. And again, it's just balance, and it's not perfect every time, but it also just allows me to reflect on what I'm doing and I'm focusing myself in the right areas. Steve Summers he takes this to a next level. But again, and I can do this on my phone, so I use the Outlook client on my phone, which is really, really slick. The other thing I do, so that's just planning my week. The second thing I do is really simple in OneNote. Again, this works on my phone. I create a to-do list, and I can just, the stuff I need to do, I just type it out, and then I can check that off during the week. So really simple. And I also use this as part of the GTD of getting stuff out of your head. So if I'm meeting with someone or I'm have a thought that pops into my mind, I can drop it on my phone using the OneNote app into this list. So that's how I do my tasks for the week. Now that's kind of, I'm very, very, very basic, but when we started talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and Steve Wynn showed me what he did.
One Steve.
Yeah, there's 2 Steves. It's super cool. So I'll get you to take me through how you do that same process.
How many of you plan your day or take time to plan your week? Good, good. So this week, we think of this as a multiplier. If you spend a little bit of time up front to plan your week, you're not flying by the seat of your pants the rest of the day or the rest of the week. I actually take a more day-centered approach, but I did adopt the visualization, the coloring of my calendar from Gus. I have similar categories as he does. The blue is my customer time. The green is internal action, internal things I need to do. Purple is time that I want to spend with our partners. And the reason that came up is because I hadn't been spending a lot of time with our partners, and that became very clear to me because there wasn't much orange on my calendar. The one thing I do perhaps a little bit different, and like I said, I take a more daily approach to planning. I have a note in my OneNote notebook. I just call it Stuff to Do. And it's just my running list of things that I keep track of, the things I need to do. I have personal things that I'll put on here. So if I need to run to the store and pick up dinner, I put those things on my list as well. But what I do is I just say, maybe I need to draft the Contoso marketing plan. I've always said that if I didn't work for Microsoft, I'd want to work for Contoso because they got all the coolest stuff first.
And they're everywhere.
Yeah, and Fabricam, I mean, great companies. So I put it in there, and then what I do is I go up to the ribbon here, and then up here you see the Outlook tasks here. So I press the Outlook tasks button. And what that allows me to do is there's an Outlook synchronization between OneNote and Outlook, and I can determine kind of when the due date is for this. So I'll say I want to do this, I'll just say I want to do it today. And it puts a little flag next to it. So then we'll switch over here to Outlook, go back to my tasks, and you see I have draft, let me get the draft Contoso marketing plan right there. So then what I'll do is I'll take the extra step. This is for Contoso. So I'm going to categorize this. You see my task categorization here. I'm going to drag it down in here to the customer section. And now it's organized. And then based off of the due date that I had set to it, it organizes it within that category. The next thing I do from a planning perspective is I go back into my calendar view. And then what it does is it shows me my tasks down here in my task pane here. Let me kind of make it a little bigger so I can see if I can find the one I just added. Where is it? Contoso. Oh. Draft the Contoso marketing plan. So a lot of us have meetings back to back to back. People are just scheduling us without even asking. They just look at your calendar, they find some free time, they plug in some time without even telling you or asking you, right? You have no control over your calendar in many instances. So this is a way that I kind of take control of my own calendar, and I'll take this task and I'll drag it up here, and I'll say I want to work on this from 11 to, it's going to take me probably about 2 hours to do. I won't allow myself that much time. And it's giving me a reminder already that I need to do it. I didn't put it in the future. So I'll put it in the future. So 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, I'm blocking that time. Other people will now see my calendar as busy. And the other nice thing about having color-coded it, or having assigned it as a customer task previously, I get that nice color coding automatically on my calendar. I can see that's a customer thing that I need to do.
That's when Steve showed me this a couple of weeks ago. So another little fun fact. I've worked at Microsoft for nearly 3 years now. I'd never opened the Outlook client. I just used the web for everything. And I was proud of that fact. I'd never opened it.
He had to blow the dust off the Outlook
and
icon.
what Steve showed me then, when he showed me that the first time, I'm like, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll give that a try. So I did it for about a week, and it was cool, and it did work really well. But again, for the way that I work, because I was mobile all the time, I had to go back to my laptop to do that last little bit, which was it's not that annoying, but it was enough for me to go back to my old ways. But again, a great example of how it all hooks together.
But the nice thing, and I just marked that as complete in Outlook, so you don't see it in here anymore. But when I go back to Outlook, and after it syncs for a second, it'll mark that as checked. There you go, green check mark. If you wiggle the mouse a little bit, it makes things work faster. So,
pro tip.
Yeah, pro tip there. The other thing to note is that these color codings that Gus and I do, like he said, he works from the Outlook web client. You see all those color codings on the Outlook web application as well. You just can't do the dragging of tasks from the Outlook web app.
Now, it's about to get really real because we're going to take it up a notch again, and Steve Summers is going to show how he does it, which, again, just blew my mind when I first saw it.
So when this concept first sort of like rolled through our group, we're very collaborative and we tend to sort of pick up each other's habits along the way. I first saw it and I thought, wow, that's a mess. Like, it's a lot of coding. I think the colors are rather confusing. And when you look at my calendar, you'll see that I already have a color coding scheme, which is also confusing and a little bit of a mess. But it's my mess, so I own it. So what I like to do is, in my life, I actually have something along the line of 8 to 10 calendars that I maintain. I won't go into that craziness because we don't have the time. But I just wanted to show an example of how I use those calendars at work. So the first one you're looking at, just the regular blue one, is my O365 calendar. It's the one that everyone schedules time against. It's my public-facing calendar. It's the sort of the master calendar throughout the day. The other calendars that I have here, the yellow one is my team calendar, and that's coming from a team site that we had set up as a team to work on together. We put things there that are like our status meetings, events that may be in specific regions or cities that we want to be aware of. It's just sort of a good thing to know. And I like it in an overlay format so I don't accidentally schedule something against it. I may not be attending that event, but I want to sort of have an eye on all of those events as they occur. We also keep our out of the office messages there so that I can quickly see who on my team's out on a specific day. The final tab there, the red one, is my personal tab, and that's coming in this case from Outlook. And all I do is I just link that as an internet calendar from the Outlook web app. I take the Outlook link, dump it in here, and then I can see that schedule as well. So I know, hey, I should probably make sure I block off this time here so that I don't accidentally schedule against it. One thing about me is that I really like to keep my personal and professional lives separate.
He just held up 2 phones for the recording.
Literally, for those of you who are listening to this presentation, I maintain 2 phones. I maintain a lot of separate things to keep that delineation. But where I do cross over, I try to make sure that I have access to all those things. So it's nice for me to be able to see my personal calendar, but I'm not going to maintain my personal calendar on my work calendar. Then the final thing I added in, just because I think it's super cool, is my TripIt calendar. TripIt is an app where you can send your schedules to this application, plane flights, hotel rooms, all of that stuff, and it puts it together in a trip. It knows that you're traveling to Chicago for Ignite, puts it all bundled together in a trip. We actually have a team function in it so that we can see everyone on the team and when they're traveling and what hotel they're at. And I really like having it as well in my regular calendar, so I include it here. One final thing I want to show about calendars that I get a lot of positive feedback on is my public calendar. And what I do is I have a public calendar.
Go to the web apps.
I'm going to the web app for it because it's a lot easier in the web app to set up. So what I do is I have a calendar that I publish that just shows my free busy time. And this is hugely helpful with my customers because the least favorite thing in my professional life is playing when are you free. Because you just send the emails back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Oh, I let that one go.
Thread this long, right?
Yeah, miserable. So the way I try to nip that in the bud is I use the calendar publishing feature available through the Outlook calendar. So the way I do that is I click on this gear here when I'm in the web client. There's a calendar section, publish calendar. And what you do is you select the calendar option, and then you tell it what type of settings you want to have, what kind of permissions you want to send to the web. So in this case, I only want to see availability, and I have 2 options here. I have an HTML option if you want to plug that in just to, like that. This is the one that I actually send to my customers, or the ICS one, which is something you could plug into something like Outlook so that you could see that calendar. It's similar to the idea of what I did with my personal calendar into the Outlook calendar. Now I take an additional step, and I put in, I have a shortener, aka.ms, Steve Summers Cal, and that's what I actually end up sending to people, because obviously having that URL is a bit of a pain. So I'll show you what my real calendar looks like.
Typing is a pain too.
Typing is difficult. But I'd rather type Steve Summers Cal than. So this is then my web calendar. So then my customer is able to say, hey, it looks like he's free on this day, or he's going to be available this other day. It's not perfect. Like, I wish we could all see each other's calendars in an ideal world, but it does allow for a shortcut. And I got a lot of great feedback from my customers saying, like, hey, that really helps us in terms of saving time. So I wanted to share that tip with you today.
And just to be clear also, this is an admin control within the Office 365 admin console, so it is a tenant-level setting. So if you don't see the setting, you may not have it enabled within your network. But I think part of the admin setting is to say only display availability, so people couldn't send their details. So just be aware of that.
And so that's how I maintain my calendar, and it was different enough from how these guys do it. I wanted to share some of those tips. The other thing that I wanted to show is how I actually plan out my week. So I plan my week with this sort of bookend philosophy. At the beginning of the week, I like to go into my team group in Yammer, and I post what my top 3 for the week are. And this is something everybody on the team will do so that we can all kind of have an idea of what people are working on. These tend to be big projects, not like, hey, I have to schedule a meeting, but rather like these are the big things I'm working on for our customers or with the team. And we just share this here in the thing. We usually put in something like CSM stand-up or East Team Weekly. We have a hashtag so we can pull up that topic to look at it in later. I then take that, I cut and paste it, and I put it into my weekly check-in note, which is what I review with my manager at the end of the week. So that's the other end of the bookend. So I call out what I'm going to work on at the beginning of the week, and then at the end of the week, I review it here on the right and just say, hey, this is what I achieved this week. Keeps me honest to make sure I actually get stuff done. And then I also have something that's a template for every meeting I have with my manager, which are 3 what we call big rocks that I try to get done every week. And it's similar to what they're doing with the idea of a context of coloring things for different things for the priorities in their life, or making sure that they want to spend time with their team, that type of thing. Mine is development for my team, development for the business, and development for myself. So what I'm trying to do is, as I do those things throughout the week, I slot them in here. When I then go in and meet with my boss, I change this to the actual date that I'm having the meeting. We typically have this in a shared location, so we can both take notes together about what happened in the week. I love it because it keeps a nice action list for me as I accomplish things. It makes me feel good that I've accomplished them. It has it ready for me to review with my manager. And then I also, at the end of the quarter, when we have our review process, it gives me a list of things I can go back and pull out and say, these are the things I accomplished, because these are the things that are important to me professionally, and it's sort of an ongoing journal that I keep, and it solves a lot of problems for me across the board. The final thing that I use is, again, this is one of my favorite applications. It's and somehow I got out of it. Apologize for that. A tool called Remember the Milk. Who here uses Remember the Milk in any capacity? Okay, just a handful of you. Remember the Milk is one of the first. Oh shoot. I'm not going to spend time logging into this. I'll come back to this. But Remember the Milk is one of the first applications that I stumbled across that was truly platform agnostic. I could use it in a web browser. I could use it on multiple devices. And it enables me to sort of keep one list across personal and professional. I'll walk you through a little bit later when I talk about planning my day, actually using it. But we'll come back to that.
So that was planning. So Steve Summers is a 4-day planner for that. He just plans that last day.
No, but what I like about I like how he buckets, puts things into the big rocks, and everything supports those big rocks. So again, when we think about not just creating a bunch of tasks just to stay busy, but creating tasks that lead to his identified big rocks that he bookends, the front and the back, with discussions that he has with his manager.
So now we're going to move on to the next cue, which is really around messages and how you triage your different inboxes, whether it's Yammer or email or that type of stuff. So again, I'm sure after this week, we all probably have a lot of messages sitting there. So Steve Summers, while you're going, do you want to maybe take us through how your process, how you sort of spin those out?
Sure, absolutely. So every day, and this happens probably 3 times a day as well, but when I start the day, I like to triage in 3 different things. The first thing I do is I triage my Yammer inbox. I do most of my communication through Yammer. It's the nature of how my team works and the nature of most of the customers I work with. I then triage my email, and then I triage my to-do list based on inputs from that and also the idea of what big rocks I'm trying to accomplish that week. So let me walk you through that real quickly. The first thing I do is I go through my Yammer inbox. I start with the oldest to the newest. The first type of message is a message where somebody just needs a quick response. My rule of thumb is like, if I can do it right now, I'm just going to do it right now. If it's going to take me a while to do it, then I'll schedule it. So this is something from my colleague that's asking, when we decided that we're going to do the sales conference, I'm just going to give the quick response which said, we decided November, because the sales team will be there. Boom, I got that done. That's easy for me. The next thing is something that my colleague Karen has asked me to review some materials, and this is something I'm actually going to probably spend a little more time on, so I'm not going to try to crank it out right now. My rule of thumb is if it takes more than 5 minutes, I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to put it on a to-do list and then spend some time going through that to-do list later in the day. So what I'll do is I copy this URL. I go over to Remember the Milk, which I was logged into, and I write out what I need to do. So review deck. I'm going to use some coding that is inherent to Remember the Milk. I'm not going to ask you to be concerned about that today. But what I'm doing is I'm marking that this is due today, that this is something for my work, and I'm keeping it on a work list, so when I need to filter down, I have that already. And then I'm going to drop in the URL so that I know the conversation that I'm referencing there. And then I just save that, and it's ready to go for when I'm ready to go to that project. So this way, that's cleaned out of my inbox, and I'm ready to move on. So the next thing I do is I triage my email. And the primary thing that I do in email is if it's a conversation that I think I'm going to look at later, I put it in OneNote. And this is part of the reason I'm so married to the desktop client, is that the interaction between email and OneNote is far superior in the desktop clients and the rich clients. So for example, here's a conversation, and I know I want to save this conversation because it's something I'm going to reference later. I put it in OneNote because I find it's easier to reference it, to search on it, to make notes on it. So let me just show you an example. I click the OneNote plugin button. I'm going to put this in my customer service and support area. And then I'm just going to make a note here. Just so I can have that note later on. One reason I really like this is that if I have meeting notes, if I have a whole group of conversations around a single topic, I can actually store them all together in one location. If you sub things in OneNote, and I'm a huge, huge OneNote fan, I'll talk more about that later. If you sub things in OneNote and you put them underneath each other, you can then collapse those conversations so that you can keep them all in one place. And I do this because for a specific customer, I may be working on 5 customers in a week, and a bunch of stuff's coming in, and these 3 things for this one customer, these 2 things for this one customer. I like to sort of group them together so I know I can find them all in one place. It's my one stop for everything I have around that customer or that project, however I might be working.
So we were floored when we heard that Steve keeps literally every single email. If you saw his real OneNote, it's mind-blowing, all the things he keeps in there. But as we talked through it more, and I was thinking, why would you keep all your emails in OneNote? I mean, from a search perspective, Outlook does a really good job of search. So the main reason is the note-taking capability, right?
So the main reason is the note-taking. I can add my own context to it if I want to. But I find the grouping things together is really useful. I also love, and I'm going to show this later on, the ability to link OneNote to meetings that I'm having. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a meeting, if it's an email, if it's notes I'm taking on my own, if it's just something I'm sketching out. I keep it all in one place. My OneNote is sort of my Bible of everything that I'm doing in my life. If I lost my OneNote, I would basically be unable to move forward.
Lucky it's in the cloud.
And a lot of people use Outlook that way, and I think that Outlook has some limitations around, using it as sort of file storage, but I think OneNote is just a much richer way to do that, and I highly recommend, if you're not using it, to explore how you could adapt it to your own.
Emails in OneNote don't count against email storage, so that's another reason. Don't tell your admins I said that.
So then the next type of email that I might deal with, once I do this, I just throw this into sort of a generic folder, which is I'm going to throw into on temp. I don't really need it. The next thing that I'm going to come to is a conversation that I've received from someone about setting up a meeting. We're going to come back to that in a little bit, and I'll show you how I set up a meeting based on that queue.
So my method is, let's call it simpler. Very, very simple. So again, majority of my stuff I do is in Yammer, but do have emails as well. So I will always come in, and I actually probably do this on my mobile first. The new Yammer mobile app has the swipe left and right to read, unread, archive, unfollow, which is a pretty nice addition. And I do the thing that you're not supposed to do and use my inbox as, well actually, I use my inbox as my to-do list in Yammer, and the idea is that by the end of the day, that's empty. Steve Summers showed me, Steve Wynn, too many Steves. Steve Wynn showed me a trick that we'll get into later on about how you can hack Yammer a little bit as a to-do list. So it's literally as easy as I go in, same rule, can I do it in 2 minutes? If I can, I do it. If I can't, I mark it as unread, and I'll come back to it later on. And my email is probably even simpler. Again, using the power of OWA and its simplicity, I have literally one folder called All Mail, and if I don't need it in my inbox, it goes there. Most likely it probably gets deleted, so I do have a deleted one. And I just use my email inbox as my task list, and again, try and get stuff out of there every day. If I need to keep it, All Mail, otherwise it gets deleted. So super, super simple, but again, works on every device. Again, the Outlook app on iOS is ridiculously good. So if you're not using it yet, get on board, because again, so you can have the swipes and you can customize them. So if I have a message, I swipe right, it puts it in my All Mail folder. If I swipe left, it deletes it. That fits my work style really, really well.
That's one of those tools that I started using as a result of our conversations. I love the Outlook app on iOS.
It's very slick.
And so I'm somewhere in between these guys, and we started off talking about GTD. For those of you that did raise your hand and have read the book, you know this notion of context. For those of you that aren't familiar with this notion of context, the book talks about being able to categorize your activities and your tasks based off of the context in which you'll be fulfilling them. So as an example, some of the typical ones that they talk about in the book are things like at work or at home or maybe someday. Those are some of the things that they reference. So I take a similar approach to mine, and I have mine set up as actions, and I'll show you that. I'll show you how I do that in just a second. But similar to these guys, I spend most of my day in Yammer. Oh, typically, by the way, I just want to throw this out there. I talk to a lot of customers, and they'll say, I don't want my people wasting their time on Yammer. I say, what if I told you that I spend 80 to 90% of my day in Yammer? Would you say I'm wasting my time? Because I could show you all of my work outputs. I could show you all of the communications that my team and I are actually working on. We're building work products. We're having productive conversations. Am I wasting my time? No. So that's just a little nugget for you guys to...
And I do think, actually, not to go too far down this path.
We spent a lot of time on the booth this week, so we got a lot of questions.
I do think that I'm more productive in Yammer than I am in email. I feel like email, there's a lot of repetitive, replies to things, and I just spend more time organizing my email and going through it than I do with the same equivalent conversations
Right.
in Yammer.
And these are just habits, I think, that we've built up over time, and that I personally find it a lot easier to be able to scroll through and consume feeds. I can visually see who messages are coming from and kind of skip over certain ones that I don't feel like I need to consume right away, versus in email, you have to take the action of clicking it, opening it, consuming it, deleting it, and sometimes that doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take time and it adds up. So I like this feeling of just being able to kind of scroll through things really quickly. So I also start my day in Yammer, and I start my day in my inbox. So I have this message from Allie here. And Yammer doesn't have a really great way, doesn't have any way to manage tasks except for Gus's method of keeping stuff in your inbox. And I traditionally try to be an inbox zero type of person, so I try not to keep too many messages in my inbox. So I like to get rid of them. Again, in email, if you're not, or I'm sorry, in Yammer, if you're not familiar with the inbox, these are just messages that are being triaged because I've been @mentioned or it's a private message. So generally, these are messages I need to take some sort of action on. So what I'm going to do here, this is Allie asking me if I could send a draft of the customer plan for the Office 365 Awareness Fair. I'm going to hit More, and then Email me. So what this is going to do, I'm going to go ahead and hit Email me. This is actually going to take this and put it into my kind of my inbox, my digital inbox being Outlook. So it's going to send me an email, and I sent one to myself beforehand in case the Wi-Fi was bad. So here's that message. And you can see I can click on this link, and it's going to take me right to that conversation in email. But what I do is, because this is an action, I take it and I drag it over into my action folder here. And there it is.
This is your context.
Yep, I'm sorry, yeah, these are my contexts. So I have an action, I have a reference, and I have a waiting. Those are my three main ones that I use. So if I need to take an action on it, I move it there. I also employ Steve's 2-minute rule. If I can do it in 2 minutes, I just do it straight away. But if I need to take a little more time, I move it to my action folder. I'll also take the step of categorizing it, and I'll make that a customer action there. And then that'll also show up in my customer area here as an email. Should. In a bit. But then I can also, again, go through that same process of dragging that up to my calendar, blocking that time for me to work on that. Again, the other thing I love about this is I always have the context of clicking on the link to go back to the conversation if I don't remember what the full context of what was happening was going on. So I can always go back to that.
Very good. So that's it. That's how we manage our inboxes, which is, again, very different. I love Steve Wynn's how it actually falls back into the way he runs he plans the day and schedules tasks, so it all links together very, very nicely. The next sort of cue we want to talk about, the thing we do is scheduling a meeting. Has anyone here not scheduled a meeting before? Good. Captive audience. So there's tons of different ways you can do it, and again, all three of us actually do it differently. Surprise, surprise. Steve, while you're up, do you want to take us through how you do yours?
So I employ the window pane rule. Does anybody know the window pane rule? Lonnie, you know it. Here you go. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
You just broke my streak.
0 for 5 now.
So the window pane rule is if the message is longer than the window pane, I generally try to take the effort of picking the phone up and calling the person. So in this case, I'm reading this email. It's kind of long. It's talking about Avengers. Jeff is busy. He's in a meeting, actually. But let's pretend that he's available. No, he just became available. All right.
Look at that.
So I can hover over his card, start a chat, say, "Hey Jeff, just read War and Peace, aka your email. Got time to talk about it?" For those watching the recording, Jeff is feverishly responding. Did I really read it? I skimmed it. But wondering if think it would be easier to talk. Okay. there. All right. So he says it's good. We'll call. Call will come through. How many of you guys use the integrated link integration? Good.
It's great.
I can hear the phone ringing on my side here. And
So I answer
Jeff
the call,
is connected.
and then we're thrown into a call, which we won't do here, so we don't have feedback like crazy. But sometimes it's nice when you're having this conversation, you're like, you know what? Like, I think it'd be a little bit better if we had this face-to-face, so I can actually read the expressions on your face.
Am I really being that jerky about it?
I think that you might possibly be. So let's find out. And there we are. So this is a great way to really make it a personal connection and not just sort of get into those email wars where you go back and forth and there's a lot of mistaking of tone. Gus is just going to wander through all of the calls.
I'm from the future.
He's always one day ahead. We can go ahead and terminate that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, so I had an April resolution around presence, and where since I do work from home, I do work remotely. I do a lot of Link or Skype for Business calls, and it's very easy to get distracted, right? There's Yammer up, there's instant messages flying back and forth. I can check my email, but video is actually a really great way to get people to be present because I can see if your eyes are moving to a different screen, or I can see if you're checking your phone. So if you're trying to get people to be more present, video is a great way to do just like that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually a really good point. So in my team in APAC, we kind of mandate, or it's almost like a known thing that you have to do video when you talk. My only exception to that is when we do these planning calls and it's 5 a.m. for me. No one needs to see that. It's not a particularly good look at 5 a.m.
So Gus, so the simple approach, let's hear yours.
So do we even have to have a meeting? That's always my first response. Because we're a global team, a lot of the time I can't do that. I can't do the call. I can't just pick up Steve and call him at midnight because I'm in the future. And then, so my standard response, and it sounds like a cop-out, but it works really well, is can we put this on Yammer, open it up, mention me, let's see if we can, schedule a meeting, that's fine, but let's see if we can get this out loud first, because the end result is no more meetings. That's what we really want. So if we can try and sort it out, yeah. So it's that simple. Otherwise, I can actually do what Steve did then in the cool web client. So you can do that, and you can reply via IM, which will spin it up and do that sort of stuff. So it's quite good, but always work out loud, always post on Yammer first.
But there are times that we actually have to have a meeting. So so Steve, why don't you walk us through
That's
how
right.
you set
So
up
of course I'm the one that overly complicates the meeting. So let's walk through that process. So I said earlier, one of my cues is I get an email. This is typically something where I'm like, you know what, we do need a meeting for this. We're going to have to talk to each other. We need to schedule some time. He's asking for help with a workflow where we're going to need to go through things together. We work in different locations, so we're going to do this via a Skype call. This is where I think the power of O365 really, really comes into play because there's so many linkages between the different applications. You can really create a productive work environment by sort of connecting those things together as you follow the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this meeting button, which will take the content from this meeting and the people on the meeting invite and throw them into a meeting. So everyone who was on the original email distribution will then be thrown into this meeting. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out with the scheduling assistant when Dan seems to be free. So he seems to be free for a half hour later this afternoon. So I'm going to go ahead and select that time. The next thing I do is I attach a Skype meeting. That's great because then he will just have that link in his Skype. He just clicks the link. It'll launch the session. We'll both be in the meeting together. The next thing that I do, which is sort of a personal preference on how I make sure the meetings are productive, is I include 3 aspects. The first aspect is a prerequisite. So these are things that somebody needs to prepare before we go into the meeting together. So for example, if we're talking about a workflow, hey, can you bring the current process? So the first thing is bring current workflow. That's the prerequisite. The second thing is and this is somehow really, really disruptive to people, let's have an agenda. Let's actually talk about what we're going to talk about in the meeting so everyone knows we're on the same page. So we're going to review workflow options. And then the third is, what is the expected outcome? What is it we want to get out of this meeting? And I definitely feel that if you don't have outcomes determined out of a meeting, then you probably shouldn't be having that meeting because you're not ready to meet yet. So my outcome is that Dan wants a slide to include in deck. So he's going to go present to his leadership. He needs to have a deck, and he's going to put that current workflow in it. So those three things I include in every meeting I have. I find that too often I get thrown into meetings, I don't know what it's about. It's just a bunch of people thrown into a call, and they're going to hash out how we're going to get through that. That's extremely non-productive, especially when you just throw lots and lots of people into it. So I'm trying to keep it tight by including those three things, a prerequisite, an agenda, and then an outcome.
So what is this? Anybody know what's he doing? It's a multiplier, right? He's spending a little time up front to plan the meeting to make sure that everybody knows what the objectives are. He might plan it for an hour or so. But if they got done in 30 minutes, would anybody complain? Save a little time, spend a little time up front to perhaps save some time at the end.
That's right. The final thing I'm going to do, and did you have a question?
If you've got a culture where what everybody does is not plan and get together and hash it out, because they don't do that, do you have suggestions for moving towards something like this?
Well,
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so sorry, the question was, what if you have a culture that doesn't like to do that? I absolutely work in a culture that doesn't like to do that. I will actually, as a requirement, before I attend a meeting, I need to see these three things before I'll attend. So if somebody just tries to throw me in, it happens all the time, hey, this customer needs this, let's throw everyone who possibly could answer this question into a meeting and see if we can do it. In that case, if they don't know who's the best people to do it, I would follow Gus's methodology and say, hey, why don't we start a conversation in Yammer and hash out a little bit what needs to happen before we just meet. I don't think meetings are a great way to gather information. I think meetings are about people working together. There are better ways of soliciting feedback. They're a lot more respectful of people's time. So my recommendation is I just sort of try to stick to this for myself. If you don't have this, especially if you don't have an agenda going into a meeting, that's killer.
I think it all goes back to that slide earlier about the culture of busy or culture of productive. I think most of us probably feel like we live in a culture of busy. It sounds like that's the culture you live in. But we also are the types of people that believe in changing people one person at a time.
That's right.
And kind of building those things up and allowing those things to scale up. So if you do that, if you take that step and you start to do it and then other people start to do it, then you can start maybe have a viral effect.
I think
on
a good
the culture.
example of this, and I'll be brief, is everyone tends to start meetings 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, because you wait for everyone to come in the room. But there's a theory that if you just always start meetings on time, people will start showing up to meetings on time. And so I think it's a good example of that. It's like if you sort of stick your ground and try to start that change, that's a good way to do it. And explain to people why you're doing it. You just don't have to be a jerk about it, but it's a good opportunity to sort of spread that out. Yep. Well, I've always heard that meetings should be 50 minutes. There's some people who think it's a good idea to have meetings where everyone stands, which is harder when you're doing a web meeting. I think the standard hour is just sort of like our default. But I don't know. Do you guys have an opinion about that?
I'll show you how I run my meetings, and it's actually got a timer built into it, and it can break down the agenda so you know you're going to hit everything you need to. But I'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
So let me finish this out, and we will have some time for questions at the end to come back to some of the things. I want to be respectful of how much time we have left. So the final thing I do, and this again is because of my love of OneNote, is if you click on the meeting notes section here, it will actually prompt you where you want to create notes for this. And this is great if you want to start assembling materials before the meeting. I'm going to share these notes in our staffing and development area, which is a shared notebook that I share with Steve/Dan. So that will have that ready for us when we get to the point where we're ready to talk about this meeting. So here's the pre-information for that meeting. You also see that now it's added that link to that meeting note into the invitation that I'm sending.
That's pretty slick. I'd never seen that again.
And that's
Can't do that on the web
this
client.
is a lot of this stuff is based on the desktop client, and so this is part of the reason I use that so rigorously. So I'm gonna go ahead and send this. It has all the information I want. So that OneNote, I put that OneNote in a notebook that I share. This is a team notebook that lives on our SharePoint site for our team. The same calendar that I was showing you for the leadership team, that's the same notebook that this is. That all sits in that same site together. And I just jumped it into the folder about this topic, staffing and development, so that we know we can come back to it later. So I'm going to go ahead and start that meeting, and we'll show you. Are we ready to start?
Yeah, so this
I got the invite. I'm ready.
Okay, great.
I came with my pre-work.
That's great.
That always
You know, I love that. Yeah, everyone's always prepared for every meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off that meeting. Now, one thing I'd like to show is.
Steve,
Yep.
just-
One question. When you share that, you send that invite that person, and they want to maybe forward it to get somebody else's feedback. Will they have access to the OneNote if they didn't have permission on your SharePoint site?
No, it's going to be security
so
trimmed.
just the question.
Yeah, sorry. So the question is, if that person doesn't have permission to that location, will they be able to share those notes? And no, it's going to be security trimmed like anything else within the SharePoint, that you only have permissions to that specific. So you want to make sure that if you're doing a shared notebook, it's actually a situation where you can have a shared environment. So one thing I want to show here, which I think is super slick about the Skype for Business and OneNote integration, is that as people start attending the meeting, it keeps track of them in the attendee list. So you see that now that both myself and Dan have joined the meeting, it does a checkbox to show that they've attended. I think this is super cool. I used to always keep at the upper right-hand corner, I wrote everyone's name and tried to keep track of it with that. But this integration makes that really easy. It also has all the information from the original invite. And one thing that I love is that it has the presence aspect of it. So I can see if I want to say, hey, pop him a direct message or send him an email during the presentation, I can do that as well. So this is the shared note space that we'll have during the meeting. Let's jump back into the meeting, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to work together. The first thing I'm going to do is say, hey, Dan, is it cool if I record this meeting?
Sure.
As a rule of thumb, it's respectful to always let someone know that you're recording them. So I'm going to make a recording so that we can come back to that as a reference. I also want to show off some of the recording that is embedded into Skype for Business. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to attach my own notes from what I think the workflow process should be into this OneNote. And then while I'm doing that, you're going to load your pre-work into the Skype meeting.
Yep.
So over here in my notes, I have a proposed workflow. I'm just going to grab this, copy it, dump it into this, so that we have the notes that I was taking, and we can reference that on the call. But now we're ready to, did you have a chance to upload that deck?
It's there.
So you can see now that in addition, we can see a deck that Steve just uploaded into it.
Can you just explain, because I only learned this yesterday during tech rehearsal, why you would attach a deck and not just share your desktop?
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they are sharing their presentations, they'll just straight out share their whole desktop, right? And just hit PowerPoint and you see the whole screen and you can share that way, right? You can upload, if you didn't know, you can upload the presentation right into the link meeting as a piece of content. And then one of the things that is nice about that is it maintains all the transitions, and you can use the arrows here, arrows at the bottom to click through.
Yep.
You can click the arrows. This is just a simple deck. But one of the other benefits is that the Office graph, when you upload this presentation into Skype for Business, the Office graph starts to mine that information about the fact that Steve presented this deck to me. So that is just another signal that goes to the graph that helps to inform it a little bit better. If you just are sharing your desktop, the graph doesn't pick that up.
And then one thing I want to point out here in OneNote is that it's acknowledged that that presentation had been uploaded into it, and I can actually include that deck in this. So it's going to have actually the attachment for the deck as part of, I think I clicked the wrong option here, but it'll include all of the artifacts from that meeting in the meeting. So everything that's sort of associated with that meeting in the header, the original invite, the attendees, all of that, starts to populate this OneNote. So it makes it this really rich environment, and we actually haven't started doing any work yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch into a whiteboard mode. I'm going to click the More button under the Presentation button. I'm going to throw it into whiteboard. This is just a cool feature that it can be really helpful. And I'm not sure why this didn't present. It's good to see that we could be angering the demo gods.
It's Friday.
How many copies of the PowerPoint have you made by now? Just one, or have you made a couple of copies?
So the question is, how many copies of the PowerPoint have we made? That's a great point. And this is actually some feedback that I gave to the Skype for Business team. So to answer your question, yes, it is another copy that you've uploaded there. You might want to think about whether you make changes to it or anything like that, just knowing that there is another copy there. I think a great Skype for Business update would be just a link to OneDrive, right? And just share that right to OneDrive. Not there yet, but maybe we'll see that someday.
Yeah, so I'm not having a lot. Should we?
You want to switch over to me?
Skip
I've
over the whiteboard.
got the whiteboard. So this is just another way to think about making your meeting a little bit more engaging. So remember, the objective of the call is to think about what the new process flows should be. So you can see Steve is drawing on there. I'm actually using my Surface, so I can start drawing. Say maybe this should be the flow from here. So maybe that's our diagram. I can change colors, of course. This goes into there. That goes there. So.
Yeah, so do you have the ability to, do you have that OneNote open?
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things that we want to show as well is that you can take this whiteboard and save that into the OneNote as well. So we can take all of the artifacts from the meeting and have them all in this one place. So what Steve's showing right now is that you have the ability, it should be under the ellipsis, I believe. Yep. So you can save directly to OneNote. It's going to prompt him on where to save that. So if you go to leadership team, actually we're on the help with that. So you can just attach it to that actual meeting itself, and it'll dump that into the note alongside everything else.
So then I could take that and go back into PowerPoint, clean it up, whatever the process might be after that. But
and we're running a little short on time, so I'm just going to show real quick how you then end the recording of the meeting. We say, hey, great meeting. We really nailed what we needed to do. We didn't even take an hour for it. We're going to click Stop Recording. One thing to know about the recording process is that after you record, it takes a minute to process. And so you're going to want to publish it. And once you publish it, then it's going to be available to post wherever you need to post it so that people can reference it later. That's a step sometimes people miss when they record those, is that publish step. So I just want to point that out.
Okay. All right. So we've been, we're just going to, we'll try to stop for questions. We just want to run through a couple more demos here real quick. So these are all kind of nicely planned things that we planned our day, but interruptions always come up, right? People stop by our desk, whatever it might be. Perhaps I'm on Twitter, or perhaps I have my phone out, and I'm scrolling through, and I see this article. It kind of intrigues me because I don't know if you remember that email that I got from Steve earlier, but he was kind of making reference to the new Marvel series. So I see this tweet in my feed, but I don't really want to spend the time to consume it right away. So one of the things I use is a tool called Pocket. If you go to getpocket.com, you can set up an account. It's a way. It's kind of read it later if you use any of those services. But like Steve, I really like Getpocket because it's cross-platform. I can access it on any of my devices, and it's got a really nice integration with my phone here. So I found this article. I can hit Send to Pocket, and it gets sent there. And then I can go to my Pocket here. And then right there it is. So I always have reference to this. And it does cache it on my phone, so I can kind of read it offline if need be. And so I really like this Pocket application. But it doesn't really, there's not really a good way to have Pocket in my kind of corporate life. So if I find a message or if I find an article within Yammer, there isn't really a great way for me to, I could send this, let's say I'm going through here. Jeff has posted this blog post about kind of a recap of Ignite, but I don't really, again, I don't have time to consume it just yet. So what I can add it to Pocket through the web client here. But one of the things I also have in Yammer, and this is kind of a Yammer hack that I have, is I have Dan Jumps Pocket. And so what I can do here is I can share this.
That's a group you've created.
Oh, yeah, correct. That's a private group that I've created. And the nice thing about it is I can add little tags. So just like Steve was doing for his emails, he kind of hashtags those emails or puts little notes of what he has to do. And I can say review and send to boss later. And this is just a private group. No other people have access to it. Oh, there was an error sharing this conversation.
I think because it's in a private group.
Oh, it's already in a private group. Okay. So I won't share that one. But anyway, I'll go to Dan Jumps Pocket here. And then this is where I have all the things that I want to reference. And I won't let that load right now. The other thing that this is really helpful for me for is with Delve. So inevitably, I come to Delve to look for something specific. Either I'm searching for it, or I have it right in my feed. But shiny object, there's some presentation that I want to look at, and I'm curious about it right away. So let's say this campaign presentation just caught my eye. But again, I don't want to get distracted. I had a purpose of being here, so I use my Pocket for this instance too. So I hit Yammer, and I can use the document conversation when it loads here, and I can send that to my Pocket. It's not going to load here right now, but some people might say, well, why don't you use a board for that? I could use a board for that, but a board is going to be much more community-oriented, so other people are going to be able to submit stuff to that board. Perhaps I don't. Perhaps I want to have my own thing that I don't necessarily need other people adding stuff to. That's why I keep this Yammer group for this particular purpose. I think boards serve a different purpose where it's more kind of community and collaborative.
Yeah.
All right. We've got one more thing to go, and I think this is the most important, and I'm sure everyone in this room will use this as well. Who here has to submit expense reports? Couple? Racked up a few this week? So this is another multiplier where we can save a lot of time by using an app called Office Lens. I know Amy's in the room. I blew her mind the other day when I showed her how to use Office Lens. And now I'm going to blow all your minds with how we use Office Lens. So let me flick. Steve, do you want to take us through? And this is also the one thing that all three of us do the same.
Actually,
that's how good it is.
I think we have a little bit of time to do this other thing, right? So we've been going to a lot of sessions, right? And you guys have been going to a lot of sessions, people taking pictures of the slides. And sometimes, and then somebody would say, well, all the slides are posted. Why are people taking pictures? But I like to tweet some of the slides, right? So it's helpful for me to take a picture and be able to do that. So I'm just going to take a picture of the screen here. If I back up.
If you want swag, you need to take a picture of this and tweet it.
Yeah, so we have Ninja hashtags that we're going to hand out. If you come up to us at the end of the session and show a tweet that you posted that included those hashes, hashtag ninjas or hashtag 4screens, and that picture using the Office Lens, come to this corner here and we'll show us that you posted it to Twitter, and we'll be happy to give you one of these. It's a bottle opener as well, by the way. So.
And you see, I took that picture at an angle, right? And you're not always sitting in the most optimal place for you to take the perfect picture of that slide. And so the great thing about Office Lens is that when I hit done here, it straightens it out. It takes off all those wonky edges. And now when I tweet this, it looks like, it looks close to the slide, right? So kind of late in the conference to get this tip, but you can perhaps use it at Ignite 2016.
We were anticipating the keynote, but they didn't give us that one. So.
They didn't call us up on stage to show this in the keynote.
Come to Chicago in 2016.
But the thing about this is so I can hit done. I can send it right to my photo library. And so now it's in my photo library, so I can go to Twitter here. You guys know how to send tweets, right? So I'm not going to tweet it at CNET. Hit the camera. There it is. Done. I'm not going to send the tweet out, but I'll sure why not. Ninjas. And might as well put Ignite on it.
It's available on
All phones.
All phones.
yeah.
Yep. So the last thing we'll show here is using this for expenses. And so like I said, I travel quite a bit, and I come back from my trip, and I'll look at my expense report, and it says something like Philadelphia LLC. Like, what the heck is Philadelphia LLC? I wasn't even in Philadelphia. Did my credit card get hacked or something? So I actually take pictures of all of my receipts. We don't here in the U.S., we're not required to turn in all of our receipts. We have a certain limit. But I take a picture of them anyway because I run into those Philadelphia LLC situations, and then I got to go find out what that was to put in the description. So I use Office Lens for that. And so I can take a picture, and this is just, I have the mouse pad here, so it can detect the edges of the receipt here. But you see it's looking for the edges. I'm going to take the picture there. And again, it takes a couple seconds, cleans it up super nice, hit done, and then I'll send it to OneNote, and I'll say this was breakfast.
So one of the features that's embedded into Office Lens is OCR. So it's not just straightening it up and making it look good, it's also scanning for any text in that so that it's then searchable text.
Yep. So it'll should sync here in just a little bit. Thought I had one ready. I didn't.
I use this too, and it's what you can do is when this loads up, when I get back and we have to submit expenses at the end of the month, you can come into OneNote, package them up as a single PDF, and send it off. So the way I used to do it, again, that whole multiplier thing. It's about a habit, and I had to change it because I travel a lot. We'd have tons and tons of expenses, and then I'd come back at the end of the month and I'd have to spend half a day to a day doing expenses. Has anyone done that before? Half a day doing expenses? Couple there, yeah, couple hands. So now it's that habit of every time I get a receipt, I take out my phone, take the photo, and it takes time and it can distract you, but it's that multiplier effect, and it actually helps much quicker. So you can see.
So there's that. And so let's say I was in a different part of my notebook here, and maybe now I'm doing my expenses, and I see on the expense report that it was $16.17, and you see there it automatically found breakfast. So I can go to that receipt. Oh, that wasn't Philadelphia LLC. That was a Spoken Bird. I can write that in the description. Save time. Didn't have to go didn't have to do a search to find out what Philadelphia LLC. To your point, multiplier for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very, very short on time, and that's probably it for the tips. Do you want to maybe just give us your number one?
Yeah, I don't think it's a big
tip?
surprise. My biggest productivity tip all around is OneNote. Like, it revolutionized how I organize and how I keep top on everything. My biggest thing is I just never lose anything. I have track of everything through OneNote.
My biggest thing is the main tenet of the Getting Things Done book is the mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. So I want to try to get stuff out of my mind and into a system. So use your mind for having real ideas.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one for me, and you saw we all do it differently, and I myself have even done what I do now 100 different ways. It's really just about trying things that make it work. To be honest, probably the most efficient one I've used is a pen and paper, and I just write my task list down as it comes to me. I've now recently, talking to these guys, switched to OneNote, which makes it easier. And there's the two things with GTD that matter the most. One is writing it down, and that's easy, and put in a trusted space, whether it's OneNote or Evernote, or it doesn't matter what it is. But the trick to it is to go back to it. So it's got to be the system only works if you go back and use it, which I always struggle with. But OneNote's that one thing I come back to. So try and build those habits.
Yep. So we do have time for a couple of questions.
One thing I do want to mention, if you do have a question for us and you don't have the opportunity to stay, we can hang out and answer questions right now because we don't have another session to go to. But if you want to go to the Ignite Yammer group, and post your question there with either hashtag BRK2105, hashtag BRK2105, or hashtag Ninja. We'll find it and be happy to answer any of the questions you may have. We want to be respectful of people's times. However, we do have 3 minutes if you want to run up. We have a ton of swag to give for questions. We have some power bricks. But the big one for the first question is a consumer O365 year annual subscription. So we also have some T-shirts, whatever. So
coming up to the mic.
Feel free and come up to the mic and ask questions. Go ahead.
Hey guys. In the notebook, when you're saving from Office Lens, will your OneNote for Business be integrated into that soon? I found that I can only use my personal OneNote.
Hey,
Is there? It is personal OneNote. I don't have a way. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have any of my OneDrive for Business notebooks yet.
Thank you.
Yep.
we were both drawing on the
Come on
whiteboard
up for the.
We were sort of rushed there, and mine froze,
Yeah.
so I wasn't
Yeah.
able to show it.
Will it be possible to share a OneNote directly from Skype for Business and edit it together directly from OneNote instead of sharing the program and show it to everybody?
I think that's what we did. That capability, if I understand your question correctly, is there already. So two people can be in the same OneNote,
Yeah, of course.
and you can both be editing that page at the same time.
But can I open it directly from Skype for Business?
Oh yeah, actually you can. In that the presentation, I don't have it up right now. But if you click the little whiteboard thing, it has the OneNote tab there. You go there.
Okay, thanks.
So my colleague John is going to be checking the Twitter thing.
Oh yeah, can you give? He asked first. Can you give him the card?
So if you guys would
Just one more question about the recording. Does it go into the OneNote as well?
If you have the
recording
Twitter
of the link
post, my
session?
colleague John there will be happy
Steve.
to check that and hand that out.
Sorry, there's a guy asking a question.
Is the recording of the Skype for Business session put into the OneNote as well, or is it somewhere on my desktop and I have to put it?
It's saved. Excuse me. It's saved into directly onto your drive, just because it's a rather large file and that processing takes some time. So you're gonna have to take it and put it where you want to put it. Yep. Yep.
One last
No,
question. on
the people asking
sorry.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
If we're not on Skype yet, but we're still using Link and stuff, are all those same features available with the ties to OneNote and all that? Like putting in the list of who attends, all of that stuff in Link
I didn't hear the
versus
question.
Skype?
So
The
if-
question is, go ahead and ask again. Sorry about that.
You know, so we use Link every day for all of our business meetings and stuff,
Yep.
and those tie-ins you were doing with OneNote, where it pre-fills the list of attendees, all of that stuff. Is that all available in Link? Because we're not
Yeah.
on Skype for Business.
Yeah,
It is-
yeah,
yeah, it
absolutely.
is in-
It's
it
the
is in
same.
Link.
It's the
Yep.
same feature. Yeah, we just switched over to Skype for Business like 2 weeks ago, so it's all carried over from Link. Yep.
Okay, how to get the lens for Android? It's not on the Play Store.
It was just recently released. It should be there.
I tried it the whole week, so I know there's a preview version somewhere. So it should be out the next days, right?
As far as I know, it's out there. I
Yeah.
could double check, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Show that gentleman there. Give me 1 second.
Yes.
This is actually the first time I've ever seen Yammer, and it looks really cool. Is SharePoint required to use Yammer?
Nope.
No?
You can actually start using Yam even without Office 365. There's a freemium product that you can, and end users, it's almost all the end user functionalities there. There's some admin stuff you don't get, but yeah, you can go yammer.com, sign up with your work email address, and your network's created, ready to go. You'd probably be surprised. There probably is a network for your company already. Like someone would have done that at some point. So you just get dropped into that one. Yammer
You're a
on,
lot
man.
better at the throwing again.
The thing about sharing notes prior to meetings in OneNote, I think that's pretty cool. But what do you do if you have like multiple different audiences? You keep switching between having meetings with different people all the time. It's not always the same group. It's not the same team that you have meetings with on a daily basis. I have perhaps 10 different meetings a day with different people I have to meet up with. So how do you share notes in OneNote?
So typically what I have is I most times take meeting notes in my own OneNote because it may not be something where the collaborative space is available. So for example, if I'm with a customer and it's a one-off meeting, I won't necessarily, I just take notes on my own. But if you do have the ability where you're in a shared site together, like so for example, all of my team meetings, we do everything in a shared notebook. It really just sort of depends on the nature of the meetings that you're having and what your collaborative environment is with those people.
I think that's where the contexts come in also. You could organize your OneNote notebook based off of context. So maybe it's a customer context or a customer name as your context, and that's where or maybe it's a team, a specific team that you're working with. You can create notebooks centered around those. So when you're switching between meetings, you're just switching between either the tabs or the pages.
Let's get this gentleman here next.
Oh, sure.
kind of to expand on what the guy like 5 guys ago said, I work for local government, and I don't want to get in the same kind of trouble Hillary Clinton's in right now. I work hard to use work stuff for work stuff and personal stuff for personal stuff. And right now on my Windows 8.1 phone, both Office Lens and OneNote seem to only want to communicate with my personal Microsoft account. And I want to share that stuff because it's a work phone for work, only for work, with people at work. Is there like a workaround, or am I missing a like a newbie type step? Because the OneDrive on my phone connects fine to the shares at work and to SharePoint, the email and all that seems integrated. But this seems like a kind of like.
I think that's just a current limitation of Office Lens, and I think it's something that we can definitely.
But the OneNote on there too is the same way.
Yeah.
So there is a slight hack you can do that. So in OneNote itself, when you go to insert a picture, the camera, when you say go camera, it actually uses the same technology as Office Lens. So, and in fact, I don't use Office Lens. I just open OneNote and do that. So you could do it that way. Instead of using the Office Lens app, just use the OneNote app and then the camera function inside it.
And I agree with that gentleman. I think they just recently changed it that you can choose where the default location is to save on it.
I'll try again.
But it's not.
Yeah, it gave me an error when I put in my corporate credentials.
OneDrive for Business.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I came here to learn about what I thought I was coming here to learn about, and I've ended up learning the most about OneNote. And I feel like I still know maybe like 4% of what it can do.
Yep.
Is there a great resource somewhere where I can see a lot of these interactions? Because you've shown me more. I saw more at the OneNote session yesterday, but where's a good place to go so I can really learn how to leverage the power of that and then turn around and give that to my team and the people that I support?
That's a great question. I'm not sure about that.
Okay. So there's a OneNote group in the Office 365 network. The product team hangs out there. I hang out there too. There's the OneNote blog is really good too.
Yeah, it's really good.
They post a couple times a week, either packs that they've created or tips that they put out. And the OneNote Twitter handle, I follow them too, and it's pretty informative. So I haven't gone on YouTube to see if there's any videos, but my guess is there are. Also, if you're familiar, if you have access to a Microsoft Technology Center close to you, they run, periodically they can run sessions that kind of walk people through OneNote too.
I have one more power pack if you're interested in that. I just don't want to whip it across the room at your head.
Just actually, that was part of my question too. I do know there are some other products that I've seen that with some folks I've talked to this week that there are like user guides and things that you can customize for your organization. Does OneNote have anything like that for, not for me, but for noobs that I can kind of follow that off to so people can understand how to use the product?
Chris, were you gesturing that you have an answer to that or not? No. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Chris will answer that. Yeah.
It's just your strut, your confident strut, led me to believe that you knew something about the question. Are there guides that are available for people to kind of customize and use for their organization around OneNote? Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if the Success Center has anything at all. Let me see if.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head. We can do some research into that, and
I think you're similar to me in that I think the way we learned OneNote was just by trial and error and creating an organization system and just pecking around. But if you go to the Success Center here, there's some resources around kind of launching Office 365. I don't know if they have OneNote, but we'll find some things and maybe post in the Office or the
Ignite
the Ignite
network. Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Cheers, mate.
Hi, this kind of relates to an earlier question. Just as you're taking a lot of notes in OneNote, do you have any tips or methods as far as when you want to create a new notebook versus subsections and groups and things like that?
Yeah, I used to create a lot more notebooks than I do now, and the reason is I get invited into notebooks as I'm working on projects or teams, so I actually trimmed down mine a great deal. I use the section, could you switch over to mine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use you can actually create subsections within a tab within a notebook. So you can group these together into a selection. So I could like take these two and create like a section group. And then you can also use then sort of the sub drill downs that I have. So you actually have the ability to create quite a level of hierarchies within a single notebook.
We can group tabs together within the notebook.
Yeah, that's right. So you could also group the tabs and create these
sections.
Yeah, they're like section groups. Section group. I forget what they're called off the top of my head. So I have this section group. I could drop both of these into that, and that actually works then as sort of like a sub notebook within that notebook. I used to do, honestly, with searches, I'm sort of agnostic to it, but I find that I have so many notebooks on my left-hand side now in my navigator that I ended up collapsing a lot of mine. I used to keep four for different areas just to sort of help me keep them, and now I've collapsed them down to two.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks.
Hi. I was surprised about you dragging a conversation from Outlook into OneNote.
Yep.
What's happening when there are more messages coming to the same thread in Outlook?
So what I will typically do is I will drop them in. If there's something I want to, if it's a Me Too email, I don't keep it. But these guys said I keep every email. I only keep every email that I think I might want to come back and reference later. I'll drop it in and I'll sub it, and I'll drop so that I can roll up that conversation if I need to.
And actually, you drove me to the second question I had.
Yep.
I was surprised to see, and many people do, they delete messages after they process them.
Yep.
I never delete any email I receive or
Yeah,
send
I'm
in
real
the
bad
last
about
15
deleting
years.
Yeah.
And many times it saved my life because people are referring to something and I'm always able to search for them. Obviously, I process them to a folder called processed or something.
Yeah.
So,
I try to delete. I'm just a hoarder in general. I use the organizational tool of OneNote to find it again, but I do tend to like squirrel them away. I never, ever, ever go through email again. I never go back and look at it. I never search against it. I do all of that in OneNote, but for some reason I still keep it. So that's a bad habit, and I'm glad everyone left.
I use searching all the time.
I delete. I don't save anything. I delete all my messages. And then I'm also similar to Gus in that I'll encourage people to post it to Yammer instead. So that's kind of my selfish way of saying, don't make me store this message, put it out on Yammer, because I often describe Yammer as being self-documenting. You don't have to worry about saving it. It's just there. It remains there. It's searchable. It's accessible by other people. So that's another reason, I think, to get people to think about posting to Yammer. And the other thing, I wish actually more people were here to think about this, is that because Yammer has groups, it's kind of automatically filing stuff for me. So I don't really have to think about what folder does it go into, because people are posting to that natural group that it should belong to, and I also know where I should go to for that message as a result.
And it sort of has its own context.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, mine's more along the lines of after you've taken notes, or how do you take the notes in a way that they're useful for later? Like this week, I tried to be mobile and used my phone, right? And I just type a straight stream, like a brain dump as we're going through.
Yeah.
But is there a better way? Because now I'm thinking, oh, now I need to do a trip report, so I have post-processing.
So my team members will tell you, like, going into my brain can be a little scary, but the way I do it is I outline, like, so as topics come up, if somebody says, hey, I have 4 things to talk about, I'll actually keep them just directly underneath the notes. I just write them out as I go, and I tab things in. So if somebody's talking about topic 1, I just tab things in as I go through it. Then I always keep on the right-hand side the goals that I want to accomplish out of that meeting. So if there's like 3 things I want to make sure to cover, make sure I get questions asked or whatever, I always keep that over on the right-hand side. One of the reasons I love OneNote, and I use Evernote in my personal life, I like OneNote because you can move things around on the page. So I keep my goals on one thing, and then I also keep action items as part of that. And that's one thing I didn't have the time to go into today, is creating tasks out of those action items that then I assign to people after the meeting directly from that OneNote. So I just try to keep my notes in one place, and then I have other areas where I maintain other things that are sort of like offshoots of that meeting but are relevant to it.
So I use my Surface Pro 3, and I use the inking capability. And if you stop by the OneNote booth, there's a guy that does this way better than I do. But I like to sketchnote. And
back in time, if they travel back in time. And
yeah,
do that.
yeah, right. But I like to do this this notion of sketchnoting. And I used to be this like transcribe everything as much as I can, and that's just I kind of lose things. And so there's this book called the Sketchnote Handbook. It teaches you, or it explains kind of how to think about big ideas and look for big ideas and capture those in a visual way. And so for me, I can go back, and this was the keynote. This is my fancy drawing of Joe Belfiore. Talking about Windows 10, and this was control swipe left, swipe right. That was like one of the tips I picked up from him in Windows 10 is control left, right to switch between desktops. I like using multiple desktops. This was Gurdeep Paul. So I like this. I like this visual nature. I don't consider these to be very artistic. Over time, I've kind of practiced, and you kind of practice certain things that you're always drawing. But yeah, at Microsoft, we draw a lot of clouds.
Looks way better than mine would, but.
But see, you should see my early stuff. It's not that. I don't even think this is great.
So do you ever take traditional notes then?
Occasionally, yeah, I do. I mean, majority of times I'm doing that. But if it's if I can kind of really settle in and do this, then I prefer doing it this way.
It's really interesting. I haven't played with that yet. I also don't have a Surface.
I've got a question about Outlook. As a receiver of meeting requests, I feel like I'm missing a setting or a preview that the information gets cut off in the email. So I cannot see if they've included an agenda or the Skype link unless I accept or tentative the meeting, go to my calendar and open the meeting. And then I see all of the information. So when I'm getting the email request, I'm missing a preview or a setting that I don't have turned on. Any ideas what I'm missing?
You know what, lady? I like the cut of your jib. Why don't you schedule a meeting with me on Monday? And I'll take a look at it and
Thank
see if
you very
have
much. I
something
appreciate that.
Are we done?
Listen, thanks everyone so much. We appreciate people hanging out afterwards.
Thank you, guys.